Welcome to Uncovered. It's Wednesday. I'm Anthony Davis. He is Ron Filipkowski. And between us, we're going to try and get our heads around some of the crazy stuff that's happening across the MAGA universe. We uncover the MAGA propaganda that is not uncovered by the mainstream media. We've got so much to talk about, Ron. Well, obviously, we've got the win for Donald Trump in Iowa. Well, that's certainly how he's spinning it. We'll look at that in a little bit later. Got some DeSantis stuff to talk about as well. But let's start with the big news of the day, and that is that Carroll took the witness stand this morning in her defamation trial against Donald Trump, marking the first time she's confronted the disgraced former president in a courtroom. Carroll's testimony so incensed Donald Trump that he had numerous outbursts, apparently, and the judge has warned him that he could be kicked out of court. And they kind of taunted each other. Tell us, just bring us up to date with what's going on there.
Yeah, so I follow 4 or 5 different reporters that are in the courtroom at any given time, and I'm constantly reading their stuff, so I can almost get a complete transcript by combining what all of them are saying. So I think that what happened here is the judge, Trump is there today. Carroll is going to testify. She's obviously a sex assault victim. A previous jury has already found that. And Alina Habba is there. And I think that Judge Kaplan also has the experience of knowing what happened in the other trial, the Engoron trial, where Trump and the lawyers had all kinds of antics, misbehaved, threw temper tantrums, and Engoron largely let them get away with it. And I think one of the big reasons is he's a different type of a judge, number one, but number two, there's no jury there. Right. So when there's no jury there, you can kind of allow some of that stuff because a judge can sort of tune it out. But when you have a jury there, you can't let the jury be influenced by all of that stuff. So you have to shield the jury from nonsense. And, in watching this trial, and when it got time for Alina Habba to cross-examine, that's where things really went off the rails. But before that, the judge was constantly stopping her and lecturing her on, when you object, you're supposed to object with 1 to 3 words, objection leading, objection asked and answered, but Alina Habba doesn't do that. She makes speeches, and, he kept telling her, you're not going to do that. She kept bringing up multiple times Trump wanting to go to his mother-in-law's funeral tomorrow as the excuse. And he just said, we're not going to keep arguing that. And that was another thing that she kept doing with Engoron, was keep bringing up the same things over and over again. He let her know that wasn't going to happen. So there was a number of things where he just basically kept telling her, like, sit down and shut up. And he ruled the courtroom with an iron hand. But the real comedy began when it came her time for her to cross-examine Carroll, which happened this afternoon, started about 1 o'clock, the cross. And it became very clear right away that she is not a litigator. She does not know how to do very basic things that really any first-year public defender would know how to do. She does not know how to do them.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to do a big soliloquy here, but I'll give you just one short example. So she began the cross-examination with, she was going to ask Carroll, isn't it true that you moved from Montana to New York City because you thought Montana was boring and you wanted more excitement in your life? Carroll says, no, Montana was not boring. So obviously in the 2 depositions that Carroll had given in the past, she may have said Montana was boring at some point in one of those depositions in the past. So what is supposed to happen is a trial lawyer in that situation, every question you have, you should have a page number and a line number from the deposition transcript that you're getting this information from. So it would go like this. Carroll says Montana is boring. Page 29, line 6, deposition from 2000. Very simple, right?
So everybody can follow along.
Everybody knows. So what you do then is you say, oh, Carroll says something different. You provide the transcript to Carroll, to the witness, to the judge. Opposing counsel presumably already has it. And you would just say, okay, Miss Carroll, I would like to call your attention to the deposition that you gave back in February of 2021. I want to have you turn to page 6, line 9. I'm going to read to you what you said. You said, do you recall making that statement? Yes. Isn't that different than what you said here in court today? and then they're going to either say yes or no and explain it or whatever. So
Right.
it's very simple. But Alina Habba doesn't know how to do that. So she would just go, well, you remember when you told me last year you thought it was boring. You can't do it like that, because a witness is like, how do I remember what I said 2 years ago about Montana?
Yeah.
So, and you're just trying to ambush everybody. And so she kept continuing to try to do that. And the judge took 2 breaks and said, basically, like, you need to consult with somebody who knows what they're doing, who can explain to you how to do that. But, she didn't do that. She just basically gave up and tried to plow forward.
What happened to the other lawyer, the tough guy, Joe Tacopina, whatever his name was?
He got off the case. I mean, that was interesting timing. So he gets off the case literally 2-3 days before the trial is going to start.
Yeah.
Clearly something happened there. I mean, people have speculated like maybe Trump didn't pay his bill. That's possible.
Surprise,
but
surprise.
I think that Tacopina knew this wasn't going to be good.
Well,
he's experienced trial lawyer. He's been around. He's done a lot of trials. So this would not be happening if Tacopina was in there. He knows what he's doing. But I think what he knew is that they probably had a division of labor where they sat down and Habba's going to do this, Tacopina's going to do this, and Tacopina probably said no, I'm not sitting second fiddle to her in this trial. I think that that's what probably was going on.
He also probably knew that, he probably couldn't make any ground, that he was obviously going to lose. And so, it was just how much they were going to lose by, because this is, of course, now, a civil defamation case. So this is about money, right? This is how much Donald Trump is going to have to pay E. Jean Carroll for defaming her. Was it 19 times in 48 hours online?
Yeah, it was 20, 22. I mean, here's what I can tell you. An effective lawyer can do some work on this case, because what you're trying to do is minimize the amount of damage. And there is a case to be made here. I'm not talking about the allegations have already been proved, like you said. Yeah. We're just talking about how much money. So really what this is about is, how much did E. Jean Carroll lose in earnings and income, and how, and you could also argue too, that a lot of the threats from Trump's followers, Trump was unaware of or didn't know about and is not responsible for. So there is arguments that a clever and a good lawyer can make to minimize the damage here. But instead of doing that, they're just basically walking into a china shop with a sledgehammer and smashing all the dishes. It's just not going well for them. And we'll see what happens.
But he continues to defame her. And he posted a couple of days ago, I'll show it and read it out for those listening on the audio podcast, but he posted on Truth Social, after an historic win in Iowa, I'm going to the Biden-encouraged witch hunt in Lower Manhattan to fight against a fake case from a woman I have never met, seen, or touched. Celebrity lines don't count. Naturally, it starts right after Iowa and during the very important New Hampshire primary, where despite their sinister attempts, I will be tonight, it is a giant election interference scam pushed and financed by political operatives. I had no idea who this woman was. Pure fiction. I mean, what's pure fiction, Ron, is everything in that post. Literally everything in that post, if we go line by line, it is everything can be disproved that he is saying. For a start, he's been pushing this story that he doesn't know her, right? Despite being photographed with her, despite knowing her ex-husband quite well and saying that he was a good guy. I mean, it's just so weird that you can try and, or a guy like Trump can try and rewrite history despite so much physical evidence against him.
The posts that he made yesterday and today were brought up in court. The jury today found out about those, that Trump is still attacking her. So, the stuff that kind of gets his followers all excited hurts him in courtrooms.
Yeah.
So what you said, line by line, when you say there's kernels of truth in what he says, but he takes those kernels and he perverts them. You know, it's sort of like Lord of the Rings where they turned elves into orcs. He perverts what starts out as something true, so when he talks about, okay, Biden pushed this, what he's referring to is this started with George Conway. And, George Conway has nothing to do with Joe Biden. But, the implication here is that, like, George Conway was an emissary for the Biden administration, because how this started was, she didn't want to pursue any of this in criminal court and all of that. She didn't want to go through all that and try and have him arrested. But she met George Conway at a party a couple of years ago, 3-4 years ago, and Conway was explaining to her, you can sue for this in civil court, and it's not like criminal court. And he sort of explained it all to her and said, I know a good lawyer if you want me to refer you. And that's how it started.
Right.
And so that's his argument, that Biden is behind this. But actually, when George met her at the party, Biden wasn't even president.
But also, George Conway is a Republican.
He was, yeah.
Was married to Kellyanne Conway.
At the time, he was married to Kellyanne Conway.
Right.
That's right.
So none of it makes any sense. And then this argument that Trump makes about how, I should be at the New Hampshire primary, but, they're forcing me to stay here. He doesn't have to be in court for this. There is no reason why he should be there in person.
He left court early yesterday. He left at 2:00 in the middle of the day and flew to New Hampshire and did a rally.
Yeah.
So he wasn't going to do anything in New Hampshire yesterday morning. By the way, and I've talked about this, that he's circling the drain here on. He looks terrible. He sounds terrible.
Yeah.
Let me give you a good example. So Iowa caucus is late. It doesn't even start till 6:30. So they called it early, but I mean, they really didn't have all the results, because he was waiting to see who was going to win between DeSantis and Haley. That really doesn't happen until about 11. And then, of course, he's got all the victory parties and the speeches, and everybody's patting him on the back, which he loves. So he's soaking all that in. Hops in his plane. He doesn't get to New York City until 3:30 in the morning. And he's got to be in court at 9:30, right? So then he's got to go to Bedminster, and then it's going to take Walt now to 2 hours to do his hair and makeup for him. So how much sleep does he get? So he gets there from Iowa at 3:30. He's in court at 9:30, sits there through jury selection for 4 or 5 hours, then hops on a plane, goes to New Hampshire, does a rally, turns around and comes back, and he's back in court today. Now you're telling me that this is not, because this is going to be his pace from now.
Well, that's what I was about to say. This is, going forward.
This is only getting worse.
Yeah, unless he chooses not to do rallies, of course, because you have to remember that it's not the states and districts asking for the rally to be here. Please come and do a rally, right? It's him choosing where he wants to do a rally strategically for electoral purposes or electoral college purposes. And then organizes it himself, hands out the hats, employs the crowd, pays 6 black people to stand behind him. It's his production. So this is his schedule.
And that's how he keeps the money rolling in too.
Yeah.
That, he raises most of his money through small donations from these people. So him doing these rallies is not just about self-promotion. It's about making money too off them.
He has to make a living, right? Because off the back of the Manhattan case, the Letitia James case, he's not going to be able to work in New York anymore, right? New York State. So he's got to.
And think about how much these trials are costing him.
Yeah.
And then what if E. Jean Carroll gets I think she's already gotten a judgment for like $5 million.
That's
what
right.
if she hits him for another $10 million?
Yeah.
I mean, this is not good for Trump. It's not good physically, like emotionally. It's wearing him down, and financially. Biden right now has like $125 million in the bank, something like that, war chest. Trump, he's spending the money as fast as he's taking it in.
I've just been watching a documentary on Peacock, to coin a carrier phrase, and it was about Jeffrey Epstein and Prince Andrew and that whole relationship. And there's lots of clips of Trump in there. And they're really talking about how, this set, these people, they're all narcissists, right? These men who can do anything, get away with anything, sleep with anybody they want, and just, they have expensive lifestyles, and they treat the world like they own it. They don't follow any rules, laws, as the rest of us do. And it's very interesting to me that this kind of narcissistic personality disorder seems to kind of flow through so many of these people. And so when I saw that this case was coming up, I was like, wouldn't it be amazing if Donald Trump was put on the stand and actually had to face his accuser every time he's pissed someone off or been rude, been abusive or aggressive or ripped someone off or underpaid people or not paid people or slandered or libeled people. He would never be out of court, Ron.
And he has a very difficult time with that because in the New York fraud trial, I mean, the closest thing we had to that was when Michael Cohen testified, who was, I guess his primary accuser in that case. So he was constantly throwing temper tantrums and fits and had to be calmed down while Cohen was testifying. Same thing happened today with Carroll. Twice, the judge even got to one point where he warned him that he was going to remove him from the courtroom if he didn't stop, because he kept blurting out witch hunt.
Yeah. Well, apparently he was talking to his counsel.
Yeah, but very loudly.
Doing it loudly. So and doing it in a way that if there was a jury, then they obviously would have been privy to that, right?
Yep.
But
that's what was happening.
Just think about that kind of behavior, and it goes back to what I'm saying about these narcissists, these kind of, lifelong narcissists, is that they just don't care a jot for the fact that this is a court of law. They don't respect the judge, and they need to learn a lesson, not just being hit with a $5 million fine or 20 million. It needs to be, they need to be publicly humiliated and ridiculed. I just want to show the clip of Trump.
I think jail is the only thing that's gonna,
jail. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. But the problem with jail for Trump is not going to be jail for, the average person, right? It's going to be some kind of 4-star hotel.
Well, it's still going to be painful for him. I mean, he's used to being a very pampered individual, and so if you and me maybe stayed in Club Fed that he's going to be at, we might be able to handle it a little bit better, but he's a diva. I mean, he's not going to be able to deal with it.
He's never stayed in a Days Inn motel like you and I. Right? Okay, I want to show this clip of him looking like shit. Where is this? Where is he arriving in this clip where he just looks terrible and he's wearing some kind of shirt?
This is when he got to Iowa Saturday night.
Okay.
He's just rolling in, and he looked pretty ragged out.
Yeah, okay. Enjoy every second of this. Here it is.
Yeah.
Mr. Trump, will the cold
That's a lot of cold weather. We've got a lot of meetings tonight. We're doing well. We have a lot of tremendous support. But it's nasty out there. Just let it. Thank you.
Are you worried the cold will affect your voting, sir? Are you still confident of a...
Aside from him looking grim there, and I mean, it's not fair to criticize people's physicality, but in his case, tough. That we posted on Midas Touch a photo of him like waving, and there was like these red blisters all over his fingers and the palm of his hand, and I looked that up. I was like, I wonder what that is, and what I could find is that it could be as a result of stress. It could be some kind of psoriasis as a result of stress. I mean, he is under a lot of pressure right now. He is really starting to unravel.
You can see it. I mean, that's when he first got to Iowa. Now, keep in mind, the other candidates are out there hitting bars and rodeos and farms. They're out in the snow. They're going door to door. Trump's not doing any of that stuff. He's just flying in, giving a speech, and leaving. And this is him just arriving from Palm Beach, and he looks like this.
Yeah.
The whole thing is wearing him down there. And there's a couple other things you see there. One is, in addition to the hand, that I saw a lot of speculation on that. Maybe he fell and he caught himself.
Right.
That could be from a lot of shaking hands. Who knows? Somebody he shook hands with had an infection. But he's also dragging his right leg a lot.
That's right. There's a little bit of a weird gait, a kind of limp where he lifts the right foot a little bit.
It's been a couple weeks now.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of speculation. You have all the medical people who, doctors and stuff who follow me, and they all chime in with their diagnosis. But there's a lot going on with this guy, and he sweats a lot. He slurs his words a lot. He slurred his words in that clip. There's a lot going on, and as these criminal trials continue to go on, and these other civil trials continue to go on, it's only going to get worse for him.
Yeah. I always thought, when's the McDonald's diet going to catch up with him? Because, of course, Joe Biden is slim and fit and, and he's, he's 3 years older, but he's aging differently because he's slim. With Trump, I feel like the whole kind of, because Trump pretends that the age gap's like 20 years instead of 3 years, doesn't he? Likes to position it like that. But actually, there's going to come a point where Trump can't fake it anymore. And even in that clip of him in the corridor, I saw a very kind of you used that trading places example last week when we were talking about the Dan Aykroyd character.
Kushner,
with Kushner. But do you remember when Dan Aykroyd was dressed in the Santa Claus outfit towards the end and was drunk and was like dragging his feet? That's the kind of image that I get from Donald Trump then, is kind of an old, sad, disgusting Santa Claus.
Yeah. I mean, that's the way he looks. And, you saw there, when he understands how to cover up a lot of the problems, with makeup and dress and all that.
The girdle.
Yeah. But when you see him like this, in these moments where he's caught on somebody's camera, where he's not really necessarily expecting to be filmed, we've seen that before when he's backstage at different events.
Yeah.
That's when you really see, what he really looks like.
Yeah. Fascinating. Could, of course, be tomato ketchup on his fingers. We didn't consider that. Okay, let's move on and talk about about Iowa, because this is a very interesting event that's taken place, this kind of caucus vote. We saw clips of a brown grocery bag, paper bag, being handed around and people throwing in pieces of paper. This is not the safest kind of election. I mean, if anybody was going to, make a point about the integrity of this, then they would have several points to make. But that's not really the issue here. The issue is that it was freezing cold in Iowa. There was a very low turnout. Trump got 49%?
51.
51%. Okay, just pipped it, right? Vivek Ramaswamy is out now. Asa Hutchinson is out now. So really, it's DeSantis and Nikki Haley who are kind of, and they weren't close. I mean, it wasn't a close second and third. I mean, Trump is out there. Just tell us a little bit about this vote before I show this clip of Ramaswamy batting for Trump.
Well, it's interesting to look at the three individuals that we just talked about, Haley, DeSantis, and say, okay, where do they go from here? Yeah. Number one, Iowa, the Iowa caucus voters are, the turnout was 14% of Republicans in Iowa turned out. Yeah. So, what are you going to read from 14% of the Iowa?
And they're all white Christians by the looks of it.
They're white, Christian, rural.
Yeah.
You look at the vote, how it broke down, college versus no college. Haley again does well with the college graduates. That's where votes came from. But in Iowa, the Republican primary voters in Iowa are very overwhelmingly not college graduates.
Yeah.
That changes when you go to New Hampshire, which is why Nikki Haley is polling so much better in New Hampshire vis-a-vis Trump, because there's a much larger percentage of college graduates among Republicans in New Hampshire. So that's really where the breakdown comes. Trump does really well with rural, no college voters. And so Haley is probably going to do quite well in New Hampshire. It's either going to be a dead heat or she's going to lose by a little or beat him by a little. DeSantis is going to get annihilated because he didn't even go to New Hampshire after Iowa. He said he was going to, but he didn't. He blamed the weather. The weather was fine. He went to South Carolina, and he's basically banking on South Carolina to keep him in the game. So what's going to the polls right now are 40-40 Trump, Haley. DeSantis is right around 8. And then, you go to South Carolina, and that's Haley's home state. And it's also Trump country. Trump is enormously popular in South Carolina. His biggest rally he ever had, he got 50,000 people to show up in Pickens, South Carolina. There's nothing in Pickens, South Carolina. There's no major city like in that close vicinity. So the fact that he got 50,000 people to show up in a cow pasture is impressive. So again, DeSantis has no electoral path, which is why I said yesterday that what is DeSantis doing? Why is he still in this race, especially with so many problems happening in Florida right now? DeSantis is in this race because he's hoping that something happens to Trump. He's hoping Trump gets convicted of a crime or, sent to prison or drops dead of a cheeseburger. And he's going to be there to pick up the pieces to where all the Trump supporters will say, well, we don't want Haley.
Yeah.
Trump's out of the picture. We'll go to DeSantis now. That's what DeSantis is thinking. Okay. So when all these pundits talk about, well, how can DeSantis win? That's how he's trying to win.
And it's not a bad play, Ron. It's not a bad play. You have to,
That's right.
You've got to be the heir apparent when you're dealing. I mean, it's a little bit, I guess, how Prince William feels right now with King Charles. It's like if the king falls, you got to have a second. And I think as King Charles felt when he was Prince Charles and Queen Elizabeth was still alive, it's like it's going to happen any day now. And I'm sure that DeSantis feels that, because DeSantis does not have what it takes. I mean, as we've discussed many times before, he would fill the shoes by default, but he is not strong enough to actually beat Trump in any way, right? He is relying on the downfall of Donald Trump, as we all are. I don't want DeSantis, though. He's literally just as bad, if not potentially worse.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Haley, I think Haley needs DeSantis to stay in as long as possible, because I think whatever votes DeSantis gets, he's taking from Trump. And once he's out, those votes are going to go to Trump. So Haley wants him to stay in. Her deal is she wants to win New Hampshire, do really well in South Carolina. Then you got a little bit of a break before Super Tuesday when all the southern states votes. And the idea is that all the money will come flooding into Haley, which will help her in the South. I mean, that's her plan. For me, I don't believe Haley can win, but what I have said before and what I'm still saying is I want Haley to stay in this race and to stress out Trump. Yeah. Trump made like 20 social media posts about Haley today. I mean, he's now obsessed with her, and that's a good thing. Again, the more stress we put on Trump, the more money we make him spend, the better.
And the other thing is that in the meantime, whilst the primary continues, the opposition to Donald Trump are going to really start to slag him off. And this is what DeSantis is doing now, and and Nikki Haley's done it multiple times, which is why Trump's been messaging, posting about her, is that they're starting to say things about Trump and about MAGA Republicans that they would never normally say if they were batting for his team. And so in the meantime, we're starting to hear this kind of dysmorphic audio, because it's the wrong stuff coming out of their mouths. Normally they're all singing from the same hymn sheet. And I think this is very interesting, because it's so hard to cross the Rubicon of that ecosystem where media sits. But when it's Republicans saying bad stuff about Trump, there's a good chance that some of that stuff will slip through in the right-wing media.
You are right. Finally, DeSantis and Haley are starting to take the gloves off and hit Trump. They're hitting him, I think, on a lot of things that are good, but not everything, which is they're hitting him on his record as president, the deficits, all of that. They're hitting him on some of the character issues, a little bit on January 6th, not much, just dipping their toe in there.
Yeah.
And on his age and electability. But one of them, I believe, needs to go all in on Trump's criminal cases. And they need to call, not one of them has talked about the documents case. That's an egregious abuse of power and criminality. If you don't want to touch January 6th because you're worried that the Republican base doesn't want you to go there, you can at least go after him on the documents case, but they won't even do that. I believe that if Haley actually does do that and calls him out for the classified documents, I think she will see a bump. I really do. Because I think that the Republican base, old school Republican voters are looking for that. Yeah. The only one who's done it is Christie, but, Christie really wasn't a serious candidate.
And I've heard from a few clips of Republicans doing the meme rounds at the moment saying, the way Trump has handled himself makes me not want to vote for him. The fact that he's involved in all this criminal activity makes me not want to vote for him. I do think that there is starting to be some permeation of this kind of the truth about Trump's crooked life is starting to come through. He's not the Messiah. Let me play this clip of DeSantis criticizing Fox. Here it is.
He's got basically a Praetorian guard of the conservative media, Fox News, the websites, all this stuff. They just don't hold them accountable because they're worried about losing viewers and they don't want to have the ratings go down. And that's just the reality. That's just the truth. And I'm not complaining about it. I'd rather that not be the case, but that's just, I think, an objective reality. So when
you are complaining about it, Ron.
I was going to say, he's not complaining about it.
Complaining.
What is that?
Yeah, it was a complaint. But that's perfect, isn't it? I mean, it's a perfect example of trying to, because we live in these media bubbles, and, to get the truth out into this right-wing sphere is very difficult. And when the candidates start doing it because they're just fighting for their lives, then it's actually very useful in the bigger picture of.
And to your point that you made a few minutes ago, that's why it's so important to have these Republican primaries happening. Right. This is why Trump wants to end these primaries now, and why his people are putting so much pressure on Haley and DeSantis to drop out, because statements like that get played on right-wing media. They're covering Ron DeSantis. So something like that would never get out if there wasn't a primary, because, us saying it, or Joy Reid saying it, or Joe Scarborough saying it, that's not going to get into the Republican ecosystem. But Ron DeSantis saying it is. And what DeSantis said right there, he would never have said a month ago. No. He's saying this stuff now out of desperation. He's finally telling the truth. Yeah. But the other funny part about that is, Fox protected DeSantis. He was their golden child. I mean, Fox wanted him to be the nominee ahead of Trump a year ago, but they've abandoned him. They realize he's not the guy. But for a long time, they were carrying his water. So it's funny to hear him whining about Fox when, Fox was doing one nice, soft, piece on him, profile pieces on him for months and months with nothing negative.
I was just thinking that none of these people, aside from Donald Trump, who is only presidential material because A, he's been the president before, and B, he's, such a massive star in that kind of right-wing world. But Nikki Haley and DeSantis, they're not presidential material. They just don't have the star quality that is required in this country. We do look to this kind of very. You have to be somebody who is, who can really hold the room, right? Or have people look when you come in. And Obama was the king of that, really. And Joe Biden has an aspect of that, I guess, because just by nature of his experience. But I just can't see, if something was to happen to Donald Trump, I really can't see there being any significant support for those other two Republican candidates.
No, I mean, Nikki Haley has this opportunity to carve out this moderate, minority.
But she's
woman.
not moderate. She's
not.
She's an extreme person. She is a vile, racist person who doesn't.
That lane is there for her to take advantage of, but she doesn't want to take it.
She's too true to herself.
Yeah, right.
She can't fake it, Ron. That's the thing. Tell me, why did Vivek Ramaswamy pull out when he did? Because I want to show this clip of him batting for Trump.
Well, it's good. That's a good segue. Actually, I was going to move into Vivek based on what we were just talking about, which is, he had a strange week. I mean, the way this played out the last few days was bizarre. Because I was saying for months, that Vivek was not really running for Vivek. He knew he couldn't win and all of that.
He was a Trump surrogate from the beginning.
He was a Trump surrogate who was there to debate Christie and Haley and defend Trump because Trump was going to skip the debates. And then I predicted many times he was going to then drop out at some point and endorse Trump. All of that happened. But the little monkey wrench was that Vivek got caught on a hot mic, a cell phone camera from a TikTok video.
Oh, wow.
About 2 days before the primary, the caucus, where he was telling this woman that if Trump was the nominee, the deep state was going to assassinate him this summer. And so what he was telling this poor woman, this older woman, is really taking advantage of her, was saying, look, if you really love Donald Trump, because she was a Trump supporter, if you really love Donald Trump and you care about him and you want to protect him and you don't want to see him killed, you'll vote for me, because if Trump becomes the nominee, they're going to kill him is basically what he was saying. And I think that he never expected that to like get out into the universe, but someone recorded that on a cell phone that was off to the side and posted it on TikTok. It ended up hitting Twitter. It got back to Trump, and Trump was furious.
Yeah.
So, 24 hours before the caucus, I think that they clearly had this deal going, and Trump just had a temper tantrum over that video and blew the deal up and just trashed Vivek. And, Vivek was immediately started backpedaling, apologizing. You got me wrong. Trump supporters all went after him and said, we were skeptical of this guy. Now we see who he really is. But a cult is a cult. And when Vivek immediately knew, like, I got to get out now and support Trump now because this is bad. This is going badly.
Yeah.
Which he did. He goes up. Trump, they embrace yesterday in New Hampshire. And now I watch MAGA reaction, and Vivek's all good now. He's good again.
It's so fickle, isn't it?
In 24 hours, they went from hating him to loving him.
Yeah. Well, that is the cult mentality, the cult behavior. We're not talking about the real world. We're talking about this weird parallel universe. Okay, watch this clip of Vivek Ramaswamy doing his having quit from the race, trying to kind of get back into Trump's good books by brown-nosing the hell out of this speech. Also, look at how he puts his hand on Donald Trump. This is really interesting.
Trump did not like that.
No, Trump does not like
he
to be touched.
doesn't like being touched.
And watch how Trump tries not to kind of grimace. It's very subtle. Here it is.
Yep.
Government-issued ID to match the voter file, and English as the sole language that appears on a ballot. And I'm confident this man will be the one to get us there. And this is how we get our country back. Not black or white. It's deeper than that. These are the ideals of the American Revolution. And you know what? We do have some enemies that we need to defeat on the other side, but we have challenges to address in our own party right here at home. So you know what? If you want somebody who's going to...
He is just a vile person, really, probably one of the worst people to present themselves for public office since George Santos.
I mean, obviously, I'd rather have DeSantis, as much as I dislike DeSantis and can't stand him, I'd rather have him than this guy.
Yeah.
I mean,
he's too slippery, this guy.
After that like Trump was going to choose him as his running mate. And you just don't understand Trump if you think that, because, the instruction booklet is Mike Pence. Trump will never take someone that can overshadow him, steal the spotlight, command attention. He knows that this, his followers believe that Vivek is a dynamic speaker, and perhaps more so than Trump to them. And so Trump cannot have that. You look to a Pence, somebody who's going to be clearly second fiddle, not take up any of the oxygen in the room. Trump will be the star. You defer to him. It's also why I picked Stefanik as my choice, because that is Elise. Elise will do that.
Yeah.
Vivek will never do that. He always wants to be. You can't have the two alphas.
Yeah. Well, he's also a narcissist, right?
You can't have two narcissists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. And do you know, it's interesting. There's quite a few characters that appear in American media, across the world media, who are, what do you call them? Like blowhards, people who talk a good talk, very flowery language. They obviously have an intellect that enables them to speak quickly, but it is empty. What they say is empty. It's a whole lot of words, like a word salad with an extra helping of salad dressing. This is the problem with Vivek Ramaswamy. We have Piers Morgan in the UK. Is that who you were going to say?
Piers Morgan's face was in front of me when you were saying that.
Exactly the same.
Yes.
And then out of Canada, people like Jordan Peterson, who sold a whole load of books, is probably, he's not an intelligent man. He is a far right operative. It's pretty obvious if you watch any of his interviews. and yet he presents himself as somebody who is, learned and smart and talks about surveys and, the kind of case studies. And it's like, it's just a cover. And it's the same with Ramaswamy. It is a cover for the fact that inside there is a emptiness, a loneliness, a sadness. And so they have to make an awful lot of noise. And obviously Trump's the same.
Yep, absolutely. And that's why they won't be running mates. I predicted that Vivek is going to be like Commerce Secretary or something. Hopefully not, because Trump won't win. But I mean, that's sort of where they're headed. But the other thing is Trump expects Vivek to write a very big check. Vivek is extremely wealthy. I think he's worth like $800 million.
Right.
So, Trump is looking for like $1 million check to be written to his PAC, which probably happened last night.
Interesting. Okay. Well, so that cost him quite a bit. That move cost him quite a bit. Yeah. Okay. Listen, we have to take a quick pause for our sponsor. We're going to come back, talk more about Trump admitting to taking money from foreign countries. We've got Junior talking about Ukraine giving the game away, and a whole interesting angle on Martin Luther King Jr. Day from the MAGA Republicans. That's on the way next here on Uncovered. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Maybe you have a plan to start 2024 in a new direction, maybe a little self-improvement. Well, I've been in therapy for over a decade, and it's something that I take very seriously, something I really enjoy, and something that I really have seen the results of. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, it's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suitable to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. I really do think 2024 is the right time to start making positive changes that maybe we've been putting off for years. Celebrate the progress you've already made. Visit betterhelp.com/uncovered today to get 10% off your first month. That's betterhelp, HELP.com/uncovered. Back to the show, and back to now, Ron Filipkowski. Donald Trump has always denied that he benefited financially from his tenure as president. But he goes on Fox News and gives a completely different version of the history and basically admits that he profited to the tune of $8 million. I'll show the clip and then we'll talk about it. Here it is.
And if I have a hotel and somebody comes in from China, that's a small amount of money. It sounds like a lot of money. That's a small. But I was doing services for that. People were staying in these massive hotels, these beautiful hotels, because I have the best hotels. I have the best clubs. I have great stuff. And they stay there and they pay. I don't get $8 million for doing nothing.
So much sniffing going on in these interviews that he gives
Lots
these
of sniffing.
days.
Yeah.
So weird. What's going on here? I mean, that was a bit of a kind of car crash moment for him. I don't think he even realizes what he's saying.
This is another one of those moments. We just had one with Sean Hannity a few weeks ago where, Hannity is trying to help him out and, clean up something that he just said on Truth Social. So a couple weeks ago it was that he was going to be a dictator for a day, right? So Hannity says, "Oh, you're not going to be a dictator, right, Donald? Right, Mr. President?" And he says, "Well, yeah, only for a day, though, right?" Yeah. So here it happens again, with Brett Baer in his Fox town hall, where Baer's like, there's this news report, or no, the House Democrats, Raskin, put out this report that said that your businesses took in $8 million from foreign governments, most of it from China. This didn't happen, right? This really didn't happen. So I think what he was looking for Trump to do, and I think what most of MAGA thought, was he was going to deny it. He's going to say, absolutely not. Like Eric in the past has denied this, because Eric ran the Trump businesses while he was president, while his father was president. So Eric is the one who would know. And Eric said, no, this didn't happen. So he's denied this. So then Trump gets asked about it and he says, yeah, he's like, you know what? I got nice stuff. They
Yeah.
pay through the nose because I got nice hotels, you know. Setting aside the fact that in the Constitution we have an emoluments clause that says that a president cannot do that,
Right.
cannot accept anything.
And the Hatch Act, right?
Yeah, well, that's a little different, where you can't, use government property to campaign on. So it's a little different, but the emoluments clause is really what this is, which is you can't accept any gratuity, any money from a foreign government. And, the way Trump interprets this is like, somebody can't hand him money and put it in his hand.
Yeah.
Well, he's not looking at it when like China rents out a whole floor of rooms in his hotel and gives him, 50 grand. He doesn't view that as a violation of the emoluments clause, because what he's saying is I provided a service to them, so that doesn't count because it's not a gift. That's basically his argument.
I mean, the guy just has no argument. He's such a crook through and through. It's like the criminality like flows through his veins. He doesn't know any other way. And that's how he's taught his children to kind of grow up, and they've learned from him. And so, of course, there's the tax evasion. Of course, there's lying about the size of the properties and how many floors the tower is and all that stuff. From the Forney Willis trial. But we're in a situation now where this guy is the former president. All this stuff's coming out. He's running again. I'm convinced that it is going to dent Republicans' view of him at the ballot box. I'm convinced of it now. I was touch and go for a while. I was thinking, but now as his behavior is changing and he's making these types of admissions, that was on Fox. Of course they're going to see it.
And if this primary wasn't going on, that never would have happened.
Yeah.
And that's why I get frustrated when I hear my fellow Democrats, say like, Nikki Haley should just drop out. She can't win, or none of these people can win. That's not the point.
Yeah.
I hear these experts, pundits say they're breaking it down state by state. What's the path for Haley?
Yeah.
I don't care about any of that.
No.
I want this stuff to keep happening.
Yeah.
I want him to have to keep doing town halls and rallies where he's going to keep saying this stuff and making mistakes. And if Haley and DeSantis drops out tomorrow, which is what Trump badly wants, he's not going to have all these opportunities.
And he's not just humiliating himself, Ron. He is perjuring himself.
Yeah, he
because
is.
a lot of this stuff is now being brought into the courtrooms.
It is.
Because there's so many court cases. And so all this crap that he says in public is going on the record. Jack Smith is using a whole bunch of stuff at the moment. Letitia James has been using a lot of stuff. Engoron's been using stuff. They recognize the fact that, Trump is never off the record.
Trump's statements and his Truth Social posts are constantly being presented in courtrooms.
Yeah.
Constantly.
Yeah.
He's his own worst enemy. It's literally, a nightmare for a lawyer to just, where you think you know the case and you think, this is going to be our defense and this is going to how I'm going to approach this. And then, he gets on Hannity and he says something and your whole defense just went out the window.
And what's so brilliant about it is that they're taking stuff that he's saying. It's not like they've prepared for the case months before and that's wrapped up and then they have to make their case in court. They're so open. And they're so aware of the fact that he is he has no inner monologue. So he's constantly posting a stream of consciousness that they are taking stuff that he posted that morning and announcing it in court, bringing it in as evidence. It's very impressive.
Yeah. And they're all smart enough now to monitor everything he does and says, knowing that he'll do this. And so, it's a little different ballgame when back in the day when he was president, he would say all this crazy stuff and all we could do with it really was to go to a senator or a Republican senator, a member of Congress and say, hey, did you hear what Trump said last night? What do you think about it? And they would just run away and say, I didn't see it.
Yeah.
Well, that's how he used to be able to get away with this stuff. But now that stuff is being taken into courtrooms and presented to juries and judges, and it's hurting him.
Nikki Haley was asked on TV about her views on the rape trial and the defamation case. And she was like, well, I don't know anything about that. I've not been following it. And it's just such a lie. It's just so obvious that, everybody knows what's going on with Trump and his legal issues. And, she's not had her head in the sand for the last 3 years. She knows exactly what's going on, but she doesn't want to get into the weeds of it because, her success is hanging on a knife edge.
I can guarantee you that she sat down with her consultants, her campaign manager, and they had a very lengthy conversation about that trial, whether they were going to use it, how they were going to use it, what they were going to say. She knows all about this, yeah. and she's just decided not to comment on it.
Let's talk about Don Jr. for just a moment, because he's now, that their ego, this Trump family, is such that when they go on these right-wing podcasts and whatever, they get a little bit, a little gun-ho. He was asked about how his father might end Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and Don Jr. just basically comes out with it and says what we've all been thinking and confirms Donald Trump's strategy. Here it is.
What's your opinion on the solution to the Ukraine war?
Cut off the money. It's the only way you get them to the table, right? As long as, we're literally creating the oligarch class of billionaire in Ukraine with whatever's being siphoned off, whether it's Zelensky, whether it's this, while they send young men to die as cannon fodder on the front lines because they couldn't care less. It's fucking disgusting what's going on there, that it's allowed to happen, that we shut down anything. It's so obvious. Nothing's ever going to change there if the money keeps flowing. My father would have been like, hey, you got like one more month of this, and if you're not at the table, it's done. Yep. Guess what? Zelensky wouldn't have a chance if we shut it down. So he'd come to the table, and they'd come up with something.
Absolutely.
It's what we've all been saying, right? Trump's going to give away territory. He's going to give Putin what he wants because he wants to, save face with Putin. And he hates Zelensky, of course, off the back of his impeachment for the perfect phone call.
Trump will never say, what he would have done. Whenever he gets asked on Fox or Newsmax or whatever, okay, well, you said this never would have happened if you were president. Well, what would you have done? He will never say exactly. He's very evasive. And then we get the truth from Junior because, Junior, these ideas are not coming out of Junior's head. They're coming from from talking to his dad on rare occasions that he does. And so he knows what his dad's thinking is on Ukraine. He's obviously heard it. And he just told you what it is, which is, after 1 month, he would have told Zelensky, we're cutting off all aid and you got to give Putin what he wants, and I've had MAGA people say, no, Trump, Trump would never do that. Trump wouldn't have done that. Yeah. You just heard Junior saying that. And the other thing is this, this is a sort of a new argument that you hear a lot from the right, which is that, the Biden administration and the West is being cruel to the Ukrainian people because this is their argument, their twisted mind, because it's all Russian propaganda, that the Ukrainian people are being forced to fight. They don't really want to fight this war, but they're being forced to do that by our puppet Zelensky because we want to use them as cannon fodder to chew up the Russian military for us. So we're basically sacrificing the Ukrainian people for our own selfish purposes. That's the argument that they are making now. Okay. And that they're really in it for the right reasons. They're trying to save the Ukrainian people, MAGA, right, by ending this war, which is, of course, ridiculous because what if this was our country? What if Russia invaded the United States? Are you going to say that all of these people, the Ukrainians are fighting and dying to save their homeland, that they're being used? It goes back to that whole suckers and losers of Trump's mentality towards vets. Yeah. They're all, and that's what they're saying. McCain. They're saying that Ukrainian soldiers are suckers and losers. That's basically the argument.
And it's just xenophobia and racism at the end of the day. It's what it boils down to is that there is, the through line, and we're going to talk about this in just a few minutes with MLK Jr. Day, but that this deep-seated institutional racism, systemic racism, and it extends to even Vladimir Zelensky and the people of Ukraine now. The thinking it's so backward. And of course, they're tying aid to Ukraine with money for the war in Gaza, and the CR, the continuing resolution for maintaining the government coffers. I just want to show this clip of MAGA Mike Johnson, your favorite, the insurrectionist Christian nationalist Speaker of the House, who got doorsteps. I'll take a look, and then we'll talk about it.
Speaker Johnson, a lot of conservatives.
Let me tell you what's going on. We're having thoughtful conversations about funding options and priorities. We had a cross-section of members in today. We'll continue having cross-sections of members in. And while those conversations are going on, I've made no commitments. So if you hear otherwise, it's just simply not true. We're looking forward to those conversations.
Are you open to
no more questions, guys?
Yes, I'm on the phone. I mean, it's so... He is, I call him the Trojan horse, because he is dangerous. But because he presents well and is neat and mild-mannered, he gives the impression that he's someone that you can do business with. But he has some very dark views.
He's lying right there, and that's a really bad lie. I mean, what happened last week on Friday was really, really bad for our prospects of how the rest of this week is going to go and how next week is going to go, with the continuing resolution, which expires on Friday to fund the government.
Yeah.
Because here's the problem. You need to have the person you're negotiating a deal with to actually represent his member. You need to know, when I'm making a deal with Mike Johnson and we agree on something, that he has his members behind him, right, and he's going to control them and get them to vote for it, right? That's how it works. That's how Pelosi operated, right? When you made a deal with Pelosi, it was a done deal. Pelosi didn't come back to you a week later and said, Hakeem Jeffries doesn't like it, I can't do it. I mean, that's not how it works, right? So that's what happened here. I mean, Mike Johnson reached a deal with Schumer, with the Senate leadership, the Republicans in the Senate, and with Schumer. And what happened is it got out. Some of the details got out. And James Lankford, the senator from Oklahoma, also helped negotiate that deal for Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell designated Lankford to negotiate for the Senate Republicans,
yeah,
Schumer for the Democrats. Mike Johnson is there for the House. They reached a deal. And then what happened is 10 Freedom Caucus far-right members like Green threatened to remove him as speaker because they were upset about the deal. And then Mike Johnson runs out and says that, oh, no, there's no, wait a minute, nothing's set in stone. So he basically reneged on the deal. So how do you go back to the negotiating table with somebody who's just basically double-crossed you and who also can't control his own people? And that's the problem. That's where we're at right now.
And there's also diktat coming from the Trump camp that they don't want a continuing resolution, that they absolutely want to shut down the government on Joe Biden's watch and then politicize that and use it against him.
And that's the one area that Kevin McCarthy bucked Trump on. You're right. That's what Trump always wanted. He wanted that since 2021. He's wanted the government to shut down and the economy to crash. And McCarthy wanted to be speaker and wanted to hang on to his majority, and understood that if he goes along with what Trump wants, he's going to lose his majority and not be speaker anymore. And so he went against Trump on that. And what happened? It cost him his speakership. And so Mike Johnson sees that. So, he's got this push-pull here. He's got these 17 members up for re-election in districts that Biden won that want this deal done. And then you've got, 15 or 16 people on the far right who are loyal to Trump, who don't want him to make a deal and are threatening to remove him as speaker. And he's caught in the middle, and he's such a weak guy that he just doesn't know what to do. And so he's just running around, not sure what he's going to do. I mean, it's all going to come to a head on Friday. It was, they were supposed to reconvene on Monday and hammer all this stuff out. They had 2 snow days. On Tuesday. So Tuesday and Wednesday was snowed out. So they were back doing some committee hearings today. But look, he took a long recess over Christmas and New Year's. There's not many days left now because he's been fooling around.
Do you think he'll still be speaker in 3 months' time?
I mean, I'm going to say probably yes, just because I think that after what they went through last time, where they went through Jordan and Scalise and McCarthy and all these people retiring, I just don't think that when push comes to shove, they want to go through that again.
It's too embarrassing.
And I think if Johnson was smart and tough, that's what he would say to them. He would say, look, this is what we're doing. I'm going to save you guys are all in safe districts, you loudmouths. You're going to win your reelections easily. So I'm not listening to you. I'm listening to the members who are in trouble and who are in tough fights, and I'm going to do what they want. But, he doesn't have the spine to do that.
Cassidy Hutchinson, who gave a very compelling testimony at the 6th of January investigation. She, of course, was Mark Meadows' assistant and was very much in the room where it happened. And so much of her testimony now is really kind of, building Jack Smith's case, amongst other things. But now she is under investigation by House Republicans. Representative Barry Loudermilk is kind of leading this, claiming that she's changed her story and she changed her lawyer. And I know you're going to have a lot to say about this because we know why she changed her lawyer. We know why she changed her story. But let's watch him try and pin it on her on Fox News.
They had people change their testimonies. And that's what it appears happened with Cassidy Hutchins. Her first 3 depositions were totally different than her last 2. And we found, as we talked about on this in this program, we found an errata sheet, which is for minor technical changes. Hers were substantial changes to change her testimony to match her sworn testimony to match what she said in public. The interesting thing about that, she changed attorneys during that time period. And so part of the issue is we've only been able to listen to what Cassidy Hutchins said of why she changed her testimony until this week when we found that she had actually waived her attorney-client privilege with her previous attorney, Stephan Passatino. So now this opens up for us to hear from him, his perspective of why Cassidy Hutchins suddenly changed her testimony from Trump wasn't coming to the White House to the point of where he's trying to jump over the front seat of the beast to take control of the steering wheel. That's pretty significant.
Oh, man. We should call him Barry Louder because he doesn't want the milk on the end mentioned, clearly, when he doesn't get her name right, just calls her Cassidy Hutchins 4 times just then and leaves out the Hutchinson. So maybe that's the new Republican thing. You just don't say the last syllable of anybody's name.
Yeah. Or you add an S to Jamie, or you add an S to Jamie Raskin's name.
But like that's an example of the lack of attention to detail. If you can't even get your, this person's name right, then, what detail are you investigating anyway?
Loudermilk is one of the dumbest members of Congress. He represents Northern Georgia. His district is right next door to Marjorie Taylor Greene's, and they're, 2 peas in a pod. He's not, this is so incredibly dumb. I am so happy he's doing this. I would say to him, thank you. So I pray that he has a hearing on this. He probably won't though. This will probably be one of those things they'll try and do behind closed doors and do a trial run. But when you think about what he's saying and what he's doing, this is coming straight from Trump.
Right.
Which is how you really know how strategically stupid it is.
And he hates Hutchinson, doesn't he? Trump
he hates
really
her with a passion.
Yeah.
Because she was right there in the Oval Office and she's the one who double-crossed him. And Mark Meadows does not flip and cooperate with DOJ, which he's likely doing if Cassidy Hutchinson doesn't give her testimony first.
Yeah.
Hutchinson forced Meadows to cooperate because Hutchinson was going to put him in jail. So he had to cooperate because of her. And Trump knows this, and that's why he hates her. So what do we know? Okay, what we know is what he just mentioned, that Trump world hired Passatino. Passatino went to her and said, good news, young lady. I'm your lawyer, and you don't even have to pay me. You don't have to pay me anything. Why? Because the Trump people were paying him because they knew how dangerous she was. They knew how much she knew, and they wanted to keep her quiet. And what Hutchinson told the committee, and he brought her in to give a sworn statement, and she did. And what she later told the committee was that he pressured her to lie, to cover things up, to hide things, et cetera, et cetera. So she leaves there. She feels terrible about it. Her conscience is bothering her. She consults with some family friends. They say, you need to get rid of this Trump lawyer. She does that. She hires her own lawyer. She comes back to the committee, and this is what he's talking about. And she tells them, I didn't tell you the whole story because of this other lawyer was making me lie. I'm going to come clean and tell you everything. And so what he's saying is now he's like, okay, well, we only have her side of the story. We don't have Positano's side of the story. So we're going to bring him in and talk to him about this. Here's why this is a nightmare, because she had to waive her attorney-client privilege to be able to come in and tell the full story, which she has done. Positano is very, very fortunate that he did not get disbarred or prosecuted criminally for what he did. He only lost his job. Okay. He left the firm that he was with. Okay. That's all. That's basically all the punishment he got out of this. If he goes in and now perjures himself, in other words, he does not want to do this. This is the last thing that this guy wants to do, is be dragged in front of this committee to talk about this subject. So I think it's going to completely blow up in their face. It's going to make them look terrible. It's going to be worse than any Comer hearing, where every Comer hearing, they come out looking worse than when they started. This would be on that times 10.
Talking of Comer, I now hear that they are negotiating with Hunter Biden to have him testify. So all of that crazy stuff now is probably going to blow over as well. So much of it is theater. It's a political stunt, political theater to give the impression that, the Republicans are doing something. If only they spent as much time working on policy as they do on the theatrics.
Policy is boring.
Yeah.
You want to do all this other stuff it give an example. What, here in Florida, they finally just went back into session, and they had one of their first committee hearings of the state legislature. And they only meet 2 months out of the year. And the first hearing was about banning transgender pride flags in classrooms. That's after we have an insurance crisis, we're the highest insurance rates in the country. Right. People are losing their houses because they can't pay the insurance premiums. We have the highest car insurance in the country. Our legislature's been out of session for 9 months. They finally come back, and today they hold a hearing on pride flags. That's the Republican Party.
Okay, let's finally talk about Martin Luther King Jr. Day and how it has been handled by the MAGA Republicans, because, of course, they don't like all this attention that the civil rights movement is getting. It doesn't suit them. So Lauren Boebert posted a tweet, which you put out for us. I'll read it out. She posted, Martin Luther King Jr. had a dream that we would all be equal in America. Equity had no part of that dream. It was about equality. Let's end the woke movement in America in honor of MLK Jr. Where do we start with this, Ron?
Yeah, where we start, Mark Cuban and Elon Musk had a great back and forth about this. I think where Cuban just completely cleaned his clock about DEI. This is the new thing that they want to go after, the DEI. Stephen Miller is behind it, Chris Rufo. This is their next big target, right? They want to do everything is being blamed on diversity, equity, inclusion. Yeah. And, in the past, the Republicans have always been careful not to say anything negative about Martin Luther King, and to, only cherry pick certain quotes of his that he liked while ignoring his record in a lot of other areas. And so, for this, Lauren Boebert knows nothing about Martin Luther King. Again, we could give her a 10-question basic quiz on his life, and she would get all 10 wrong. She doesn't know anything about him
or
care. So the concept that he would not have agreed with DEI programs, if you know about King, if you've read his writings, if you read his speeches, and you're familiar with more than just, the I Have a Dream speech, then you would fully understand that he would be behind these things, because what this is, it's just outreach. It's just, as Mark Cuban explained, it's just going into communities that you've never thought of going into or you're not familiar with, and finding talent and giving talent a chance. And that's really what it's all about. It's not grabbing people who aren't qualified and putting them in positions that they're not qualified for. It's giving people a chance that maybe don't look like you. They didn't grow up in the same places that you grew up in. They didn't go to the same schools, but they're bright and they're hardworking and they're talented, and you're going to give them a chance. That's what that is. And to say that King is against that, it would be against that, is just asinine.
Yeah. Charlie Kirk had an even more explicit analysis of MLK Day. Let's take a look at how he's presented it.
I haven't called for tearing down any statues, but wait a second. If you get a statue like George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, you probably got it for a good reason. You founded a country. And if you're saying that Martin Luther King is a new founder of New America, then make that argument. The question is, should it be a federal holiday? Should it be one of the largest statues, monuments in Washington, D.C.? These are legit questions. And is it the myth, the legend, the fable, or is it the reality? And what purpose does it serve? Has it made America a better country? We want all people to have a better quality of life. And Marxism is not the pathway, and race Marxism certainly is not the pathway.
Race Marxism.
Race Marxist. Yeah. Look, this he really overshot the mark on this, because like I said, in the past, Republicans have always been very careful not to criticize King, and to just kind of use the King legacy, use certain parts of it for their own purposes without looking at the full picture of his life and his work. That's what they've done in the past, which is sort of, if you're going to try and use King for your own right-wing purposes, that's probably the smartest way to do it politically. Kirk is a moron. And, Kirk decided that he was going to go after King, and he was going to say on Martin Luther King Day on his show, he did a whole special on it about how King was a terrible person and a bad guy and a piece of crap. And, he shouldn't even have a holiday after him because he's a terrible guy. And I can, he had a bunch of people on his show that were guests, and I can tell you who really, really was upset about that was Black Republicans, who I heard from and I saw on social media. And basically their argument is, we have worked Black conservatives for different reasons. And it's very difficult for us in our community to convince people to vote Republican. It's always been a difficult task for Black Republicans to get other Black people to vote Republican. It's difficult. And he goes, and they're basically, their argument is this punk just undid all of our hard work. And just, we've been trying to tell people, white Republicans aren't racist. They're good to our community, et cetera, et cetera. And then a guy like Kirk just goes and wrecks it all. And also, by the way, we hear a lot about young Black men supposedly moving towards Trump, where Trump is starting to get more and more of them in the polls. And then you have a guy like Kirk who's in charge of attracting young voters to the Republican Party, and he's out here trashing Dr. Martin Luther King on Martin Luther King Day. I mean, just complete lunacy, idiocy. And, good thing for Democrats.
This is who these people are. This total denial of the Black American story. And, I think it's important, especially this week, that we remind people that, white Americans of history enslaved Black people. It's almost like the slavery conversation, education about slavery, as we know it, barely exists in some schools. These they called them, masters, drivers, responsible for discipline on plantations, slaves being punished for not working fast enough, or for being late getting to the fields, or for defying authority, or for running away, and the punishment were whippings, torture, mutilation, imprisonment, being sold away from the plantation.
And you know what Charlie Kirk would say about that? I can just tell you what right-wingers would say, is that they did them a favor.
Yeah.
Because they're better off.
Yeah.
Them and their ancestors are better off now because they were brought to this country instead of staying in Africa. This is their mindset. This is their mentality.
It's so base. It's so offensive. It's so racist. And the thing is, if you are a black American, you live with this in the same way that, young Jewish people think about the Holocaust. There is a through line in your history. And the fact that African American women endured the sexual exploitation and rape and being sexually stalked and harassed,
had their babies taken away and
had
sold.
their babies taken away, and the abuse was widespread. As the men with authority took advantage of that situation, and it's so. We need to talk about the horrific activities of slavery, and not just whitewash it, brush it under the carpet. You taught history, and I mean, even in England, we didn't get enough of it. Enough education of these subjects, and of course, the Brits have their own terrible tale of occupation and slavery and colonization. It's just terrible, and to deny any of that, and to be Charlie Kirk and think that you're clever because you're trying to reset the conversation on this subject. Who the hell does he think he is? It's so dumb.
It's a good way of putting it. He's trying to reset the conversation about King.
Yeah.
And you know what? Hey, if they want to go down that road, go right ahead. Okay. I don't think it's a good thing, but I mean, if you're trying to win elections for Democrats, it's a good thing that they're going to do that.
Yeah. People are not so stupid. Credit people with a modicum of intelligence and understand the plight of people that maybe don't look like you. Do you know, very quickly and finally, I was watching a Nigerian woman being interviewed about Nigeria, which of course is going to have one of the largest populations in the world in a few years' time. And she was saying, we don't talk about ourselves as black. No one refers to them as black. We don't talk about our skin color. We're all black. And I thought that was a really interesting position. We don't really think about that. We think about the people desperate to kind of compartmentalize. But she was saying that in Nigeria, it's not even a subject that we would consider. Okay, well, listen, we have to finish, but I'm thrilled to have this conversation with you. If you missed any of it, you can rewind and watch it again as soon as we finish. You can download the audio podcast tonight from wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to catch, certainly Ron's work on MidasTouch.com, the new place to head for the very latest news as it happens. I'm Anthony Davis. We'll come back next Wednesday and do it again on Uncovered. Thanks a lot, Ron.